Welcome to Sleepy Stories, where your curiosity can rest and your mind can wander. Here, knowledge unfolds gently, like morning mist through trees, and you're invited to relax into the rhythm of learning. Whether sleep comes quickly or slowly, there is no need to hurry. Some thoughts drift softly into dreams, while others settle quietly beside you. Either way, you're not alone. This is a space where wonder and rest meet, where your breath can match the calm tempo of discovery. If you find yourself listening longer than expected, that's perfectly fine. Let your thoughts loosen. Let the forest come closer. And if you enjoy our journeys into science and calm, consider liking or subscribing. It helps us continue weaving quiet paths through nature's stories. Tonight, we begin with something ancient, living, and all around us. The forest is not just a place, it is a presence. And like all living things, it breathes. From far above, Earth looks like a planet alive, not merely populated with life, but life itself, swirling, cycling, pulsing. Blue oceans glint with reflected sunlight, ice caps glow at the poles, and ribbons of green stretch across the continents. These green ribbons are more than scenery. They are the organs of the planet, drawing in the breath of the atmosphere and exhaling the air that fills our lungs. A single forest may seem still, but together, these living systems inhale and exhale with the pace of seasons. Trees draw in carbon dioxide and release oxygen, each leaf playing its part in the slow rhythm of the world. In this way, forests act like lungs, not just metaphorically, but functionally. They filter, balance, and sustain the breath of the planet. The wind moves through their branches like air through ribs. Their roots pull water upward in silent columns, nourishing leaves that transform sunlight into the chemistry of life. When trees breathe out, they do so for all of us. Their respiration creates the very air we trust without thought. Every inhale we take carries the memory of a forest. It's easy to forget this connection when surrounded by buildings, traffic, and screens. But the breath you just took, that one, was likely crafted in part by a leaf somewhere, recently enough that the memory still lingers in the molecule. A tree, perhaps half a world away, sent a small gift into the atmosphere, and you accepted it, unknowingly. You give something in return, too. The carbon your body no longer needs, a part of your own cycle. There's a peace in knowing that you and the forest participate in the same quiet exchange. Even as you lie still, the world is breathing around you. Forests stretch across the planet like a vast, interconnected lung. Rainforests near the equator pulse with intense activity, while boreal woods near the poles move more slowly, in colder rhythms. Some trees stand for hundreds of years, some for thousands. But all of them are part of this breath, this shared, unspoken inhale and exhale of the living earth. As night falls, the pace of this breathing shifts. Photosynthesis pauses, and a different exchange begins. The world sighs into darkness, and the air carries a different kind of stillness. If you're quiet enough, you might sense it now, a subtle rhythm beneath your own. And so we begin, with the breath of the forest, a story rooted in silence, growing in light, and stretching skyward. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on a breeze. You are breathing with the trees now. Long before leaves rustled in the wind or birds sang from branches, the earth was quiet in a different way. The surface was stone and sea, a restless landscape shaped by fire and water. There were no trees, no grass, no green, just the raw ingredients of life waiting for their moment. In the beginning, the sky held little oxygen. It was a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, where the breath we now take for granted could never have existed. But deep in the ancient oceans, something was stirring. Tiny cells, smaller than a grain of dust, floated in the sunlit shallows. These cyanobacteria, simple and unseen, began a slow revolution. With the help of sunlight, they performed a quiet miracle. They took in carbon dioxide and released oxygen. They did this not in a single event, but continuously, over eons. Billions of years passed, and the sky began to change. What was once poisonous to complex life slowly became breathable, and with this oxygen came possibility. The world turned green not all at once, but as if in slow motion. Algae grew along rocky shores, clinging to stone. Mosses appeared on wet land, delicate and low to the ground. Ferns unfurled their spiral leaves into the humid air, each plant reaching, hesitating, then continuing forward toward a brighter, more breathable future. In time, plants grew taller. Some formed woody stems that could hold them upright. Roots drove deeper into the soil, anchoring them in place and helping them gather nutrients. Forests, in their earliest forms, began to gather along riverbanks and lowland swamps. They were smaller than today's giants, but they were the first signs that the land was learning to breathe. The transformation wasn't loud. It didn't erupt like a volcano or strike like lightning. It was gradual, patient, and steady, and in that quiet evolution, the earth itself changed. The sky turned bluer. The oceans became more oxygen-rich. The thin film of atmosphere that clings to our planet, the very layer that holds in weather, warmth, and life, became livable because of leaves. This green tide marked a turning point. Once the planet could breathe, new forms of life emerged. Insects with delicate wings rose above the ferns. Amphibians left the water behind to explore mossy ground. The very idea of land-based life, of legs, lungs, and movement, grew from that quiet birth of green. Today, it's easy to overlook the quiet miracle that plants perform. We pass trees without thinking. We breathe without noticing. But each inhale is a connection to that deep past, to those first cells floating in the sun, to the mosses that clung to stone, to the roots that reached down and the leaves that reached up. What they began, forests continue. They are not relics of the past, but living reminders of the planet's slow awakening. The next time you see a patch of green, a leaf in sunlight, a weed breaking through pavement, a branch swaying just out of reach, know that it belongs to a story older than mountains. A story that made breathing possible. A story that still continues wherever sunlight meets chlorophyll. And here, in the dark, in the quiet, that story waits patiently beside you, like a forest waiting for dawn. There was a time when the Earth's forests stood taller, denser, and stranger than anything we see today. The air was heavier, richer in oxygen, and the land was cloaked in thick, humid green. Swamps stretched for miles, and trees towered like pillars in a world without flowering plants or grass. Their trunks were covered in scales, their leaves long and feathery. This was not a familiar forest. It was a deep, primeval world. The ancient forests of the Carboniferous period were dominated by giants. Trees like lepidodendrons rose 30 meters high, their trunks straight and narrow, without branches until the very top. Ferns, the size of small houses, crowded the undergrowth. Insects grew enormous, their bodies buoyed by the oxygen-rich air. Dragonflies with wingspans as wide as eagles drifted through the damp gloom, moving between shafts of green light. In these forests, the breath of the earth grew deeper. Plants absorbed more carbon dioxide than ever before and locked it away in their tissues. When trees fell, they did not decompose quickly. Instead, they were buried in wet, oxygen-poor soil and gradually compressed into the seams of coal that still lie beneath our feet. The earth was not only breathing in, it was beginning to hold its breath. The ground was soft and rich, filled with decaying matter that layered itself over centuries. Every root system expanded this world below, and the surface of the land changed. As trees grew in number and size, they helped shape the planet's first real soils. These forests didn't just sit on the earth, they transformed it. They held moisture in place, cooled the air, and created niches for life to flourish. The sky, too, began to shift. The oxygen produced by these forests made the atmosphere more stable, more breathable, more vibrant. With each generation of tree and fern, the balance tilted further toward a world that could support animal life on land. Forests were no longer a background. They were active players in the drama of evolution. Imagine standing in that ancient green. The air is thick with mist, filled with unfamiliar sounds. The calls of strange amphibians echo from muddy ponds, and the gentle hiss of insects blends with the rustling of fronds. You tilt your head back and see no sky, only towering trunks, weaving canopies, and filtered light. The forest breathes all around you, vast and patient, a living structure that bends time itself. Though those specific forests are gone, replaced by new ecosystems and younger trees, their breath remains. The coal they left behind fuels our machines. The oxygen they created lingered in the air long enough to give rise to creatures who would name and study them. The memory of those forests is imprinted on the earth and, in a quiet way, in us. Every forest we walk through today is an echo of that ancient one. The pattern of roots, the stretch toward light, the silent gathering of carbon, it all began there. And even now, when the wind moves through modern trees, it carries with it a memory of that older rhythm, a breath that began long before us and continues still. Beneath the forest floor, where sunlight never touches and footsteps soften into silence, lies a world just as alive as the one above. This is not a place of tall trunks and fluttering leaves, but of threads, fibers, and hidden rivers. While trees rise toward the sky, their roots explore the dark, weaving through soil in patient, deliberate patterns. Here, breath takes a different form, quieter, slower, but essential. The roots of a single tree may stretch far beyond what the eye imagines, reaching sideways more than they reach down. They search not just for water, but for connection. Around them, countless fungi extend delicate filaments thinner than a hair. These fungal strands, known as mycorrhizae, form networks that bind one tree to another, often over great distances. Through these living lines, nutrients, water, and information flow like whispers passed hand to hand. In this vast, unseen system, cooperation replaces competition. When one tree lacks nitrogen, another may share it. When insects attack a stand of birches, neighboring oaks receive chemical signals and prepare their defenses. Some trees become central hubs, mother trees, sending excess sugars to their offspring or surrounding seedlings. Others act as bridges, linking distant parts of the forest into one breathing, thinking entity. It is easy to imagine roots as static, unchanging structures, but they are anything but. They grow with purpose, curving around obstacles, avoiding toxins, forming alliances. Each root tip is sensitive to pressure, temperature, and chemistry. It moves like a slow creature, sensing its surroundings and deciding where to reach next. Water, too, plays its part in this underground breath. Rain that falls from the canopy seeps into the soil, drawn upward by thirsty roots. That same water, after passing through the tree, will rise again into the air through leaves and rejoin the clouds. It's a silent cycle, turning the forest into a kind of living fountain, one that recycles, filters, and purifies. Without the roots, that upward movement would stop. The breath of the forest would catch in its chest. But there are deeper rivers still, aquifers, groundwater channels, slow trickles that carry minerals through rock. Tree roots tap into these veins and pull them upward, mixing ancient waters with fresh rain. What seems like a puddle or a damp patch of moss may, in truth, be the final resting place of a raindrop that fell years ago, carried through layer after layer of soil, filtered and cooled by time itself. Soil is not just dirt. It is alive. Bacteria, insects, worms, and fungi break down fallen leaves and old roots into nutrients. Each handful of forest earth holds more living organisms than there are people on the planet. These creatures digest, decompose, recycle. They are the lungs within the lungs, the breath beneath the breath. Without them, the forest would choke on its own remains. Even rocks have their role. As roots press against stone, they release acids that break it down slowly into sand and silt. Over time, forests create their own soil, inch by inch, turning the skeleton of the earth into a bed for life. All of this happens in silence. There is no sound of sap moving or minerals traveling, no rustle to announce that a birch has shared phosphorus with a pine. And yet, this hidden world sustains everything above it. Every leaf, every branch, every bird. The visible forest would collapse without the invisible one beneath. To walk through a forest is to tread above a vast and ancient mind. It listens through root tips, it speaks in chemistry, it remembers in mycelium. Every step presses gently on 1,000 silent stories written in root and stone. So while your eyes may follow the sunlight above, part of you already knows. The life of the forest begins in the dark, where breath takes root and waits to rise. A tree stands still, and yet it is never idle. It is a tower of quiet engineering, a vertical rhythm composed of wood, water, and light. From root to crown, every part of a tree plays a role in the great breathing mechanism of the forest. It is both structure and system, sculpture and scientist, a living architecture shaped by patience and time. The outer bark is the skin, protective and weather-worn. It resists insects, shields from fire, insulates against cold. Beneath it, just a few layers in, lives the cambium, a narrow band of cells that is constantly dividing, producing new tissue, adding rings with each season. These rings are not just age marks, they are a memory of the climate, a record of drought and abundance carved silently into wood. Water begins its journey from the roots, drawn up by suction through tubes called xylem. This upward movement is unceasing during the day, as long as sunlight hits the leaves. Molecule by molecule, water rises against gravity, not by pressure, not by pumps, but through cohesion and evaporation. It's one of the quiet miracles of nature, a tree pulling tons of water into the air without a sound. At the top, the leaves await. Spread wide to catch the light, they open tiny pores to the sky. Carbon dioxide enters. Water vapor leaves. Sunlight strikes the green chlorophyll, and photosynthesis begins. Sugars are made, oxygen is released, and life moves forward. This process, so ancient and constant, happens millions of times every second across the planet, yet it never makes a sound loud enough for the ear. The leaves do more than feed the tree, they also regulate its temperature, track the movement of the sun, and defend against pests. Some trees even adjust the angle of their leaves to avoid scorching, turning slowly through the day like a slow-motion dance. Others have hairs or waxy coatings to reduce water loss, or specialized pigments that change color in response to stress. When night falls or temperatures drop, the pores close, photosynthesis rests, but the tree continues its work internally. Sugars are distributed through the phloem, another network of tubes, moving nutrients to where they're needed most. A wound in the bark? More sugars sent for healing. A growing root tip, a fresh supply of energy. Every part of the tree communicates with every other part, not in words, but in flows and signals, pulses and chemistry. The trunk, often overlooked, is more than a support beam. It is a highway of life, hollow in some places, dense in others. It must bend in wind, flex in snow, resist drought, and hold firm through storms. Its strength comes not from rigidity, but from layered flexibility, a design evolved to endure centuries. Some trees grow fast, rising tall in decades. Others grow slowly, adding just a few millimeters a year. Some twist and spiral, others shoot upward in straight lines, yet all follow the same rule: stability without stillness. Trees move, just not in the way we're used to seeing. Stand next to one, and you may not feel it move, but its roots are shifting, its branches responding to light, its inner flow adjusting to the wind. It is alive in every fiber, and in that presence, something ancient watches, not with eyes, but with attention. There is something in the architecture of trees that echoes in us. The branching of limbs mirrors the branching of veins. The rise of water reflects the rise of breath. The strength to hold steady through change, and the patience to grow in silence. These are lessons older than language. A tree, in its stillness, reminds us that movement is not always motion, that breath can be vertical, that time can be stored in rings, and perhaps most of all, that to stand quietly and reach upward is a form of hope. As daylight fades, the forest changes its breath. The rhythm that began with the first rays of sunlight softens into something slower, deeper. Leaves that once stretched wide begin to fold. Insects settle into the quiet spaces between roots and bark. Even the wind shifts, no longer moving with urgency, but with a hush that carries scent instead of sound. The forest does not sleep, not in the way we do, but it does rest. Without sunlight, photosynthesis pauses. The pores on the leaves close, holding in moisture. The trees, still upright and strong, begin a different kind of exchange with the air. Now, instead of drawing in carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen, they breathe out what they no longer need. The balance shifts, the energy slows. It's as if the entire forest exhales, gently, into the night. This quiet change is not sudden, and it is not absolute. The forest breathes day and night, but the rhythm transforms when darkness falls. What was once active becomes reflective. What was once fast becomes measured. Sounds become rare, and each one, a cracking twig, a distant owl, seems more profound against the hush. If you were to lie beneath the canopy now, with your back against the earth and your eyes to the sky, you would feel this shift in your own chest. Your breath would slow, drawn downward by the stillness around you. There is something in the scent of soil, of bark cooling after sun, that speaks to the deeper parts of the body. The parts that remember sleeping outdoors, that recognize shelter in branches and safety in rhythm. Science tells us that sleeping near trees can improve the quality of rest, not because of magic, but because of chemistry and quiet. Trees release compounds that ease the nervous system. The sounds of the forest, soft, irregular, unpredictable, help the brain relax its guard. Even the filtered moonlight that slips between leaves affects the body differently than artificial glow. Everything here is tuned to rest. And yet, while you begin to drift, the forest continues. Roots still draw water. Fungi still pass messages. Moths take to the air. Nothing stops entirely, but everything agrees to slow down together. This is a shared exhale between earth and sky, between trees and breath, between wakefulness and sleep. High in the canopy, branches sway with the gentlest breeze. They do not resist. They yield and return, bending like slow thoughts in a dreaming mind. Below, the undergrowth whispers with the weight of moisture settling on moss. Even the stones seem quieter at night, wrapped in the pause of all that grows. You do not need to listen closely now. The forest will continue even if you don't hear it. You can let your awareness soften, let the images blur. The green of leaves becomes the darkness behind your eyes. The rustle of distant branches becomes the quiet within your thoughts. You are not separate from the forest. You are breathing with it. And so, as you rest now, remember this. Every living thing is part of the same slow rhythm. What you release, the trees will take in. What they give, you will draw into your lungs without effort. There is no need to try. Just breathe. The forest is watching over you, steady and unchanged. Sleep, if it comes, will be held in its branches. Even as the forest breathes with the rhythm of night, something remarkable continues unseen, the creation of rain, not from clouds that drift in from oceans, but from the forest itself. The trees, without moving, summon water from the sky. Each leaf on every tree is more than a surface for light. It is also a gateway for moisture. During the day, trees pull water from the ground and send it upward, releasing a portion into the air as vapor. This process, called transpiration, might seem subtle, a faint mist rising invisibly from a single leaf, but multiplied across millions of leaves, it becomes a force of weather. The air above a dense forest becomes thick with humidity. Water vapor climbs into the atmosphere, joining with warmth rising from the canopy. These columns of moist air rise and cool until condensation forms, clouds that swell not over the ocean or a lake, but directly above the treetops. Eventually, droplets gather mass and fall again, feeding the roots that first released them. The cycle is closed, complete, and ongoing. This ability to generate rain is not a side effect. It is a signature feature of mature, healthy forests. In places like the Amazon, these self-sustaining rain systems can send moisture hundreds of kilometers inland. Each tree participates in something far larger than itself, not just a local climate, but a continental rhythm. Some scientists call it a flying river, a stream of vapor drifting silently through the sky, directed by wind and guided by leaves. When forests are cut down, this breath collapses, the air dries, rain becomes infrequent, rivers shrink, and without the forest's subtle influence, weather becomes more extreme and less predictable. But when trees stand together in enough number and diversity, they transform their region into a sponge, catching water, releasing it, and calling it back again. Even in temperate forests, where seasons shift more dramatically, this water cycle plays a vital role. Spring rains wake the trees from dormancy, and their new leaves begin again the quiet work of evaporation. In summer, the canopy shields the soil, keeping moisture from evaporating too quickly. In autumn, falling leaves return nutrients to the ground, nourishing the roots that draw in winter's deep reserves. The forest does not merely receive rain, it creates the conditions for rain to return. Consider the stillness of a humid morning in the woods. The air feels soft, close. You can't see the vapor, but your skin notices it. There is a hush in the canopy, a weight in the leaves, as if the entire forest is waiting. Then, often without warning, a distant rumble or the faint scent of rain arrives. Drops fall through branches, tapping softly on bark and soil. What the trees released, they now receive again. And after the rain, the forest feels renewed. The air smells cleaner, richer, colors deepen. The world seems briefly more alive. It's not just water falling from the sky, it's the return of something earned, a replenishment made possible by breath. This exchange, so subtle and persistent, reminds us that living systems do not simply react to their environment, they shape it. Trees do not wait for water, they invite it, and in doing so, they stabilize the landscapes we call home. When you next see rain on a forest path, or mist hanging in the early morning air, consider what made it possible. Not just temperature or wind, but leaves, breathing, releasing, calling moisture home. The sky listens to the forest, and the forest, with every breath, brings water back to earth. Beneath the surface of the forest, a network older than roads or writing pulses silently through the soil. It does not flash or hum, it does not use electricity, yet it communicates, responds, and remembers. While the forest above sways with the wind and follows the sun, the forest below connects its roots in ways only recently understood. This hidden web is formed by mycorrhizal fungi, microscopic threads that link tree to tree, plant to plant, sometimes stretching for kilometers beneath the forest floor. Where a root ends, a fungus begins. They wrap around each other like threads of rope, exchanging what each cannot get alone. The tree offers sugar, made from sunlight. The fungus returns minerals drawn from stone, and water filtered from the soil. Together, they form a partnership that predates flowers, fruit, or even the first mammals. But the connection doesn't stop at nutrition. These filaments carry signals. When a tree is attacked by insects, it sends out a chemical message through the fungal web. Nearby trees receive it, and in response, begin producing defensive compounds before the threat even arrives. It's not just information, it's warning, it's planning, it's care. In some places, certain trees become central hubs. These are the so-called mother trees, older, larger, deeply rooted individuals that maintain the health of the forest around them. They share more, receive less. Through their roots and fungal connections, they nurture saplings, even those of different species. They detect distress in their neighbors and respond accordingly. When they are cut down, the forest's communication falters, like a language losing its syntax. There is a humility in discovering this. For centuries, science saw trees as loners, each one striving for its own patch of sun, its own drop of water. Now, we see something else, a network that thrives on cooperation. Survival not through dominance, but through exchange, not through competition, but through connection. And this network extends beyond trees. Fungi link shrubs, flowers, even mosses into the same system. In a single square meter of healthy forest soil, there may be hundreds of kilometers of fungal thread. They pass nutrients where they're needed most. A shaded sapling may receive sugars from a sunlit neighbor. A dying tree may release its remaining energy into the web, feeding the future even as it fades. This web is fragile but persistent. It depends on the right balance of species, the right moisture, the right soil. Disturb it too much, and the network frays. The soil dries, the trees grow weaker, and the forest's breath becomes uneven. But left intact, the mycorrhizal web makes the forest more than a collection of individuals. It becomes a society, decentralized, adaptable, enduring. In recent years, researchers have begun to map these underground relationships, using dyes, isotopes, and sensors to track what moves where. What they've found confirms what many indigenous cultures have long believed, that the forest is not a place of separate beings, but a single living community. A family, not a marketplace. To walk in such a forest is to move across a net of intention. Every step above touches decisions made below, and though you may not see the filaments or feel the messages, they are there, reshaping, redistributing, remembering. Even the fallen leaves play a role. As they decay, fungi break them down, returning their nutrients to the soil. This organic matter becomes part of the web, like old stories feeding new understanding. Nothing is lost. Everything is shared. Soil, in this way, is not just ground. It is memory. It holds the record of every root that touched it, every tree that grew above it, every rain that passed through. And within that memory, the breath of the forest deepens. What lies beneath your feet is not merely earth. It is a living archive, a vast silent web of generosity, resilience, and connection. Light enters the forest like a language, not shouted, but whispered, fractured, softened. Unlike the wide open blaze of a field or desert, sunlight here arrives in threads. It filters through layers of canopy, shifting as the day moves. What was dark an hour ago now glows in green-gold shimmer. What once blazed in morning brilliance now rests in shade. Light in a forest does not stay still. It moves like thought, like memory, flickering in and out of reach. Photosynthesis is the quiet science behind this dance, a process so ancient, so fundamental, that nearly every breath on Earth depends on it. When a beam of light strikes the surface of a leaf, it initiates a chain of reactions that turns air and water into sugar and oxygen. The sugar feeds the tree, the oxygen enters the sky. It is a transformation both invisible and immense. Each leaf is a solar panel, but softer, more alive. The green pigment inside, chlorophyll, is a master of catching light. It absorbs reds and blues and reflects back the green we see. Inside the cells, the captured energy rearranges molecules. Hydrogen from water, carbon from the air. The end result is fuel, not just for the tree, but for nearly every living creature that will ever breathe or eat. It happens in silence. No hum, no glow, no pulse. Just molecules moving, reshaping, becoming. And yet, without this daily alchemy, forests would not grow, animals would not eat, and lungs would not fill. It is easy to overlook because it is constant, easy to miss because it works so well. Some trees adapt to low light, with broad, flat leaves designed to catch even the faintest glow. Others grow tall quickly, racing toward the canopy, competing not for water or space, but for sun. Vines wrap themselves around trunks, reaching with tendrils, eager to find the top. In this way, light organizes the forest, not by command, but by invitation. It shapes how trees grow, where plants cluster, what flowers bloom when. Even time bends around light. Some leaves open at dawn and close at dusk. Some tilt toward the sun and follow it across the sky, then reset at night. Others remain motionless but shift their chemistry with the angle of the light. Entire forests rise and rest with the rhythm of the sun, obeying not a clock, but a celestial pull. When clouds pass overhead, the light dims, and photosynthesis slows. When the sky clears, it begins again. This responsiveness gives the forest its breath, an inhale of carbon, an exhale of oxygen, timed to the shifting sky. The forest is not simply reacting to light, it is partnering with it. And it's not just trees that play this game. Mosses catch stray glimmers on the forest floor, ferns unfurl in shady crevices, algae cling to damp bark, photosynthesizing in miniature. Each organism participates in the turning of light into life. Each contributes to the balance that keeps the air filled, the soil rich, the water cycling. Consider the moment just after sunrise in a dense forest. A shaft of light slips between branches and lands on a single leaf. That ray has traveled across millions of kilometers of empty space, bypassing clouds, deflecting off dust, until it strikes that leaf and disappears into sugar. It is gone in an instant, but the tree remembers. It stores the energy, passes it down, sends it into the roots, and perhaps even shares it through the network below. And later, perhaps years later, a person walks beneath that tree and takes a breath. That breath contains oxygen made from light. It is a quiet inheritance, a gift sent across time and space. Photosynthesis is not simply a chemical reaction. It is the forest's devotion to the sun, a daily act of gratitude performed in stillness. And every time you breathe in, you are included in that ritual. When most people think of fire in a forest, they imagine loss, charred trunks, ash-covered soil, smoke hanging heavy in the sky. But fire, in its natural rhythm, is not only an ending, it is also a kind of breath, fierce, cleansing, and vital. Many forests depend on fire to stay alive. In some ecosystems, flames are as regular as the seasons. They move through underbrush, clearing space, returning nutrients to the soil, and making way for renewal. Without these periodic fires, dead matter builds up, shade thickens. Seeds struggle to find light. The forest, unable to exhale, begins to choke on its own stillness. Some trees have adapted to this cycle not by avoiding fire, but by embracing it. Pines with thick, layered bark resist the heat, protecting their core from damage. Others, like certain species of eucalyptus, contain oils in their leaves that actually encourage burning, helping clear the land for their own seedling. And then there are the serotinous cones, sealed shut until the heat of fire melts the resin, allowing them to open and scatter seeds into freshly cleared ground. This might seem brutal, but in the long arc of nature, fire is not chaos, it is punctuation. It is the pause that allows a sentence to start anew. The role of fire extends below the surface as well. Roots damaged by heat send up new shoots. Soil, blackened and bare, becomes more porous, ready to receive rain. Nutrients locked away in fallen branches and dead leaves are released into a form that plants can absorb. What was once dry and tangled becomes fertile and open. The breath that fire takes away, it also returns. Animals, too, have learned this rhythm. Some flee the flames, others wait at the edges, knowing that fresh growth will follow. Birds like woodpeckers arrive soon after, drawn by the insects that thrive in burned wood. Insects lay eggs in the warmth. Deer return when the first shoots appear, nibbling the green that rises from the ash. Life re-enters the space almost before the embers cool. The timing of these fires matters. Too frequent, and the forest cannot recover. Too rare, and the fuel accumulates until the flames burn too hot, rising into the canopy, destroying what cannot regrow. Balance lies in the interval. And the forest, through thousands of years, learned that timing, not with a clock, but with climate, rainfall, species diversity, and soil. Fire suppression, in many places, has thrown this rhythm off course. By preventing all fires, we have interrupted the forest's exhale. When flames do come now, they often come too strong, not as breath, but as roar, not as renewal, but as devastation. The system, denied its cycle, rebels. Yet when fire returns in its natural form, low, slow, steady, the results are extraordinary. A week later, black soil warms under sun. A month later, shoots of grass push upward. A season later, flowers bloom in places that had not seen color in years. Fire clears the way for the forest to remember how to begin again. There is a lesson in this, that not all change is damage, that heat, pressure, and even endings can be part of growth. The forest does not fear fire. It understands it. It stores seeds that only open with heat. It grows bark thick enough to endure. It prepares for the next chapter before the last has ended. The forest knows that breathing includes both inhale and exhale, That stillness must sometimes be broken for life to continue. That light returns even after the sky turns red with smoke. So the next time you see the charred outline of trees against a pale sky, remember, not everything that burns is lost. Sometimes it is simply the forest preparing to breathe again. To the casual observer, a leaf is silent. It quivers in the wind, glows in the light, dries, falls, and disappears. But this stillness is deceptive. A leaf is always listening, and sometimes, when the moment calls for it, it speaks. The language of the forest is not written or spoken, yet it flows constantly through the canopy and soil. One of its dialects is scent. When a caterpillar begins to chew on a leaf, that leaf releases a burst of volatile chemicals into the air. These molecules drift outward, and within minutes, neighboring leaves pick up the signal. Without being touched, they begin to change, thickening their surfaces, producing bitter compounds, readying themselves for an attack that hasn't yet arrived. This is not random reaction. It is warning. Pass through air. But the signal doesn't stop with nearby branches. It can travel across whole stretches of forest, leaf to leaf, tree to tree, carried on the wind like an invisible flare. Some of these chemical messages are so specific that they can even summon help, wasps that prey on the caterpillars, drawn not by the insect itself, but by the tree's call for assistance. Below the ground, other signals travel through the roots. Trees under stress, from drought, disease, or insect invasion, release soluble compounds that move through soil and fungal filaments. The mycorrhizal web acts as courier and translator, transmitting alerts to trees that may be meters away. These messages are more than cries for help. They are instructions. They say, close your pores, save your sugars. The danger is near. Some trees respond by changing their own leaf chemistry. Others shift their growth patterns. Some delay budding. Others begin shedding leaves early to conserve energy. These are not instincts. They are decisions, shaped by biology, informed by connection. The forest, in this way, becomes more than a collection of organisms. It becomes an organism itself, a body with thousands of lungs, thousands of mouths, and a single, shifting awareness. Even the sound of leaves holds meaning. Though humans may hear only rustling, there is evidence that plants respond to vibration. The movement of air, the footsteps of animals, even the hum of pollinating insects, all may trigger changes within a leaf. Some open wider in the presence of buzzing bees. Others slow their metabolism when they sense too much disturbance. Inside each leaf, a mosaic of sensors monitors humidity, temperature, light intensity, and carbon levels. These data shape the opening and closing of stomata, the microscopic pores through which gases are exchanged. If the air is too dry, they close to prevent dehydration. If light floods in, they widen, eager to catch every particle. But these changes are not isolated events. A tree coordinates its leaf activity across hundreds of thousands of units. Each leaf is a cell in a thinking canopy. In autumn, as days shorten and temperatures fall, the forest speaks again, this time in color. Chlorophyll fades, revealing the reds, yellows, and purples that were always there, just hidden. This change is not merely for beauty, it is part of a carefully timed process of withdrawal and rest. The tree reabsorbs valuable nutrients before letting go of its leaves, and even the timing of this letting go can be influenced by the cues it receives from surrounding trees, a coordinated pause, a mutual breath held before winter. There is a deep humility in realizing that communication is not bound to our senses, that what we hear, see, and smell is only a fraction of what passes through a forest each day. There are conversations written in molecules, warnings carried in scent, alliances negotiated in silence, and while we walk through the trees unaware, the leaves above and around us are constantly reacting, not to us, necessarily, but to everything. To light, to heat, to moisture, to time. And when one of them is touched, or torn, or burned, the others respond, not in panic, but in pattern, not in isolation, but in unity. The language of leaves does not need volume. It has never needed sound. It speaks in changes, in chemistry, in presence, and the forest, quietly, listens, High above the forest floor, where sunlight first touches the treetops and winds pass unfiltered, there is a world of stillness few ever reach. This is the canopy, a suspended sea of leaves and branches that stretches out like a green sky. It is here that the forest breathes most freely, where the rhythm of air, light, and time becomes slow and continuous. Up in this gentle height, everything feels different. The air is thinner but fresher, touched by the scent of resin and the faint sweetness of new growth. Mist drifts between boughs in the early morning, then evaporates in silence by midday. Birds roost in woven nests that rock with the wind, insects trace invisible paths from leaf to leaf, and moss gathers on branches like soft whispers. There is no rush here, no sharp sounds or sudden movements. The entire space seems to float, held aloft by trunks that have grown steadily for centuries. And while the forest below is full of roots and movement, the canopy carries the feeling of pause, of slow awareness wrapped in green. It's the kind of place where thoughts begin to quiet themselves, where the mind, so often pulled in different directions, starts to match the pace of rustling leaves. Even if you've never climbed that high, never touched the smooth bark above the understory, your body somehow remembers this kind of peace. It lives in your breath, in the way your shoulders lower when surrounded by trees, in the sigh you didn't notice yourself releasing. This is the upper breath of the forest, the inhalation that draws in sky and sun. And it is where sleep seems closest. Studies have shown that the canopy acts as a natural sound buffer. It dampens noise, disperses echoes, and leaves behind only soft, irregular tones. The quiet is never total, but it is welcoming. It gives the ears something to follow, the occasional creak of wood, the brush of a wing, the distant tap of rain beginning somewhere far off. Here, even sleep moves slowly. Animals that live in the canopy rest in nests made of leaves or hollows within old branches. Sloths dangle in slow motion from one tree to another, finding dreams somewhere between movement and stillness. Monkeys curl into each other, tails wrapped like ropes. Birds tuck their heads beneath their wings, letting gravity cradle them against the sky. If you were to lie on a high platform, tucked among these treetops, the feeling might surprise you. It would not be fear or height that claims you first. It would be calm. The world feels smaller from above, quieter. Your breathing slows to match the gentle swaying of the limbs beneath you. The stars, when they appear, do not blink through buildings or haze. They shimmer through open spaces between leaves, like silver seeds caught in motionless air. Sleep, in such a place, arrives not as escape, but as return. You are not leaving the day behind. You are returning to rhythm, the slow pulse of leaf and branch, of breath drawn and released. Your thoughts loosen like vines, your senses soften like moss in shadow. Even your dreams, when they come, will be different here. They may carry the texture of bark, the sound of wood groaning gently, the scent of green things growing. You may drift through branches instead of rooms, speak in wind instead of words, rest in patterns older than your memory. And even if you are not there now, not truly nestled in the high quiet above the forest floor, you can let the idea hold you for a while. Let the feeling of the canopy surround you, light and air moving slowly, safely, with no need to rush. As your eyes close, if they haven't already, know that the forest does not sleep, but it knows how to keep watch. Let it breathe beside you. Let it breathe for you. There are trees on earth that remember what we've forgotten. They have stood through the rise and fall of cities, the turning of empires, and the quiet passing of entire species. Their bark carries the scars of centuries. Their roots clutch stone that has not moved since before the first book was written. These are the oldest trees, living monuments to endurance, patience, and time. In high mountain groves, bristlecone pines twist against the wind, their trunks gnarled and hollowed by age. Some are more than 4,000 years old, their lifespans stretching back before the pyramids were young. Their needles, sparse and unassuming, emerge slowly each year. Their growth is almost imperceptible, a few millimeters at most, yet they persist, unbothered by pace. What they lack in speed, they more than compensate for in resilience. Elsewhere, in sheltered valleys and coastal forests, sequoias and redwoods rise with a different kind of majesty. These trees do not just endure, they reach. Some stretch nearly 100 meters into the sky. A single tree can weigh more than an entire building, its bark thick enough to resist fire, its roots interlocked with others in a subterranean embrace. Though many are young by bristlecone standards, they have watched the world change with a similar stillness. The rings inside these trees are more than signs of age. They are memory. Each ring tells a story of a year, wet or dry, warm or cold. In a good year, the ring widens, full of growth and abundance. In harder times, it narrows, preserving what little the tree could gather. Dendrochronologists, scientists who study tree rings, can read these patterns like a diary. 1,000-year-old tree can carry 1,000 entries. Some have even preserved evidence of volcanic eruptions, ancient droughts, and distant fires carried on the wind. But these trees remember more than climate. They remember stillness, long periods without disturbance, the slow rhythm of life uninterrupted. They have survived not because they fought, but because they adapted. They bent without breaking, they gave without exhausting. And they stood, not alone, but with the quiet support of the ecosystems around them. Standing next to one of these giants can make time feel different. There is a hush that settles in, not just because of the scale, but because of the presence. It feels like entering a room where someone wiser is already waiting. You do not need to speak, you simply listen. You notice the texture of the bark, thick and ridged like stone. You see moss climbing upward in slow motion. You hear birds nesting in hollows made not by damage, but by time itself. These trees do not rush. Their lifespans stretch so far that a human life is a single moment in their presence. And yet, they offer shade, oxygen, and habitat without hesitation. They do not withhold. They do not expect. They simply continue. Some cultures revere old trees as ancestors, not symbols of history, but participants in it. Places where the boundary between present and past feels thinner. Forest groves become temples. Hollow trunks become shrines. Offerings are left not to worship the tree, but to acknowledge what it has witnessed. In modern times, many of these ancient beings are threatened. Logging, drought, and rising temperatures push against the edge of what even they can endure. Some have fallen in recent years, not to age but to us. The silence they held is broken before we even know what we've lost, and yet many still stand. Bristlecones on barren slopes, redwoods in the mist, olive trees gnarled by time. They do not ask for recognition. They ask only for space. To be near such a tree is to feel time slow, not in sadness, but in reverence. A reminder that life does not need to be fast to be full. That stillness is not stagnation. That age is not erosion, but accumulation. These trees breathe more slowly than we do, but they are breathing still. Near the equator, where the sun strikes with near-perfect symmetry and the air is warm year-round, the world becomes louder, wetter, and more alive. This is the rainforest, not just a forest with more rain, but a world of excess. Excess in color, in sound, in growth, in diversity. It pulses with life so dense, so layered, that even standing still feels like movement. Step inside, and the forest seems to close around you. Light filters through in shattered pieces, fragmented by leaves so numerous they block 90% of the sun. The ground is soft and shadowed, covered in fallen fruit, tangled roots, and hidden insects. The air is thick, not heavy in an oppressive way, but full, like a room with all the windows shut, saturated with the breath of plants. Here, the forest doesn't sleep. Even at night, frogs call from pools, insects hum in layers, and animals shift through the dark. There is no pause, only rhythm. Tropical rainforests cover just a fraction of the Earth's surface, yet they hold more than half of all plant and animal species. In a single hectare, there may be hundreds of tree species, each with its own strategies, timings, relationships. Some trees shoot straight upward, growing fast and lean to break into the canopy. Others sprawl wide, forming dense lower stories of vines, ferns, and mosses. Lianas twist up their trunks, strangler figs wrap around them, orchids cling to their branches like soft-lit stars. This layering of life is called vertical stratification, and it makes the rainforest more than a single habitat. It is many, stacked one on top of the other. The forest floor, dark and damp, is home to fungi, decomposers, ants, and snakes. The understory, just above, is filled with shade-tolerant plants and camouflaged creatures. The canopy, thick and sun-drenched, bursts with monkeys, toucans, and leaves larger than your chest. Above all that, the emergent layer breaks into the sky with ancient giants, each one a platform for eagles, bats, and weather. And it is not only the visible world that is dense. The chemical conversations here are constant. Trees release compounds that repel insects or attract pollinators. Fruits drop with perfect timing to coincide with animal migrations. Leaves shimmer with toxins that only specific caterpillars can digest. In the rainforest, everything is connected, not by competition, but by negotiation. Rain is both creator and destroyer. It arrives suddenly, warm and heavy, drenching everything. It scours the bark, fills the hollows, feeds the roots. Then, just as quickly, it leaves, replaced by steam and heat. This rhythm repeats itself day after day, washing away the old, welcoming the new. The water feeds the soil, but also strips it, leaving nutrients scarce, quickly recycled, constantly moving. In the rainforest, what matters is not what's stored, but what flows. Despite their abundance, rainforests are fragile. They depend on balance of rain, sunlight, species, and cycles. Disrupt one, and the others ripple. Cut too much, and the canopy collapses. Remove the large animals, and seeds go undispersed. Shift the rain, and trees falter. The pulse of the planet grows uneven. But when rainforests are intact, their effect is global. They pull carbon from the air, release oxygen, regulate temperature, and anchor rainfall patterns across entire continents. Some call them the lungs of the earth. Others, its heartbeat. Both are true. The rainforest breathes in its own way, not quietly, but with exuberance. It is a breath filled with birdsong and chlorophyll, heat and rhythm. To stand in a rainforest is to be reminded of what the earth is capable of when left to grow without interruption. It is not a wildness that threatens, but one that invites, not chaos, but a harmony so complex it humbles the mind. And even in its noise, it offers peace. Far from the equator's heat, where winter lingers and sunlight arrives at a low, slanting angle, the forest changes its shape. It becomes more slender, more austere. The colors grow muted, the silence deeper. This is the taiga, the boreal forest, the largest forest biome on Earth. It stretches in a wide green band around the top of the world, touching Alaska, Canada, Scandinavia, and Siberia. Here, the forest breathes slowly, deeply, through snow and silence. The trees of the taiga are built for endurance. Most are conifers, spruces, pines, firs, with needles instead of leaves and resin in their veins. Their branches slope downward like folded arms, shedding snow rather than holding it. Their bark is thick and dark, absorbing the limited warmth the sun provides. They grow close together, a defense against wind and cold. In this environment, every resource is precious. Growth comes not in bursts, but in careful increments. The air here carries a different scent, not the sweet, humid breath of a rainforest, but the sharp clarity of pine, ice, and wood smoke. Even in the heart of summer, the wind carries a hint of frost. In winter, the forest becomes still to the point of stillness. Snow absorbs sound, and the world feels paused, not asleep, but waiting. Life does not disappear in the cold, it adapts. Animals here are masters of conservation. Bears fatten and retreat into dens. Lynxes move like whispers through powder. Snowshoe hares change color with the season, vanishing into white or blending with bark. The forest itself slows its breath. Photosynthesis pauses, sap thickens. Trees enter a kind of suspended animation, holding their energy until the thaw. When spring does arrive, It does so cautiously. The snow melts from the bottom first, turning the ground into a patchwork of ice and mud. Buds swell slowly. Migratory birds return one by one. Streams begin to murmur again beneath the ice. The sun rises earlier each day, and the forest stirs from its long stillness. In these places, time is not measured in minutes or even days, but in the return of sound, of movement, of color. The soil here is thin, often acidic, and underlain with permafrost in many regions. Roots must spread wide rather than deep. Nutrients move sluggishly. Decomposition, slowed by the cold, happens over years rather than months. Fallen trees lie where they fall, becoming soft with moss, then hollowed by time. Insects and fungi do the slow work of returning wood to earth, piece by patient piece. Fires, though less frequent, still shape the taiga. A lightning strike in a dry summer can send flames rolling through underbrush, clearing deadwood and preparing the soil for new growth. Many conifers rely on fire to open their cones, releasing seeds that germinate in the clean, ash-enriched earth. Even here, in the cold, the rhythm of breath includes an exhale, and beneath it all, the forest remains part of the planet's lungs. Though its pace is slower, the taiga stores more carbon than any other terrestrial ecosystem. Much of it lies trapped in the soil, in the form of peat and frozen organic matter. These cold forests do not just process the air, they hold it. Their silence is storage, their stillness is protection. To walk through the boreal forest is to feel the weight of time. The trees may be younger than those of ancient groves, but the land beneath them is old, marked by glaciers, carved by wind, softened by snow. It is a forest that knows hardship and responds not with fragility, but with grace. Here, breath is measured, change comes in long arcs, survival is not swift, but steady, and in that quiet persistence, there is something deeply peaceful. Not all forests are loud with birdsong or dense with color. Some whisper in tones only winter can hear. There is a quiet that lives only in forests. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something gentler, a stillness that wraps itself around each breath like a blanket. It deepens as the day fades. As the last light filters through the trees and the colors soften into shadow, the forest enters its nighttime rhythm. It is in this rhythm that sleep finds its place. The forest does not stop, it simply changes. The leaves no longer reach for light. They rest. The wind moves more slowly, brushing along the trunks with long exhalations. Animals retreat into hollows, under leaves, into burrows. Some creatures begin their waking hours, owls, bats, insects that hum rather than sing. But even their motion carries the weight of quiet purpose. Above, the canopy sways with memory. Each branch holds the remnants of sun and storm, but now those memories drift into silence. Dew forms slowly on needles and leaves. The air thickens with moisture and the scent of wood. These are not smells that demand attention. They are gentle, faint, familiar, even if you've never truly slept among trees. The body responds without instruction, lowering its guard, breathing deeper. Science now shows what many have long felt: time in nature, especially in forests, calms the nervous system. Blood pressure drops, cortisol decreases, the rhythm of the heart finds a slower beat. But even without the science, your body knows. The slow steps on a pine-needled path, the softened light, the space between sounds, it all prepares the mind for something we rarely allow ourselves: surrender. To sleep near trees is to borrow their peace. Trees do not resist the dark. They do not resist the cold. They adapt, they yield, and in that yielding, they remain. When we rest beside them, even in thought, we begin to mimic that same trust, that same acceptance of pause. Imagine now lying on soft ground beneath a canopy that moves like breath above you. The night air is cool but not cold. It smells of moss and bark. No light shines too brightly. No sound arrives too sharply. Everything is curved, softened, rounded. Even the thoughts in your mind begin to lose their edges. The to-do lists, the concerns, the names and numbers, they loosen like the grip of a branch in wind. You are not trying to sleep, you are allowing it. The forest does not push you toward dreams. It holds the space open for them to arrive. And when they do, they come slowly, images that float rather than march. You might dream of rivers through pine, or roots winding into stone. You might not remember the dream at all, only the feeling, a breath held and then released. Even in deep sleep, the forest continues its gentle work. Roots absorb water, soil breathes through countless pores, tiny insects continue the process of renewal, but none of it demands your attention. None of it hurries. It is enough to be still, to be quiet, to let the breath come and go. If you are not asleep yet, that is fine. Sleep cannot be forced. It is an arrival, not a destination. What matters is that you are here, listening, resting, letting your body remember what stillness feels like, letting your thoughts become leaves, drifting, circling, settling. You do not need to do anything now. The forest is breathing around you. It always has. It always will. Let it breathe beside you. Let it breathe with you. And if your eyes close, let them close slowly, like petals folding into dusk. Wherever humans have settled, forests have been close by, not just as a backdrop, but as foundation. Forests offered the first shelter, the first tools, the first fuel. The earliest homes were shaped from trunks and bark. The first fires, the ones that warmed, cooked, protected, came from gathered branches. The arc of civilization begins beneath the canopy. As villages grew into cities, wood remained essential. Beams held up roofs, wheels turned on wooden axles, ships crossed oceans on hulls hewn from ancient trunks. Even paper, the medium of thought and memory, was born of trees. The ideas that changed the world, laws, songs, formulas, were first scratched onto pressed fibers that once fluttered in the wind. Forests gave generously, and people built their worlds around that generosity. They learned to identify trees by their bark, their scent, their burn pattern in the hearth. They told stories of spirits that lived in oaks, gods who whispered through branches, ancestors who walked in groves after death. Forests were not just useful, they were sacred. In many cultures, certain trees were not touched. A single cedar might stand untouched in a clearing, not out of neglect, but reverence. Groves became places of ceremony, of silence. The forest was where people went not only to gather but to think, to pray, to find answers in stillness. But as civilizations grew, their hunger deepened. The line between need and desire blurred. Trees were cut not just for shelter, but for excess. Forests became resources first, ecosystems second. In some places, entire woodlands were felled to make charcoal, to clear land for crops, to build navies. What had once been partnership became extraction. The earth remembers this. In ancient Mesopotamia, forests once stretched across fertile lands that are now dust. In Greece and Rome, once forested hills now lie bare, soil washed away. Springs dried up. The trees had anchored more than the earth. They had anchored the rhythm of climate, the pattern of seasons, the memory of rain, yet not all relationships were lost. In Japan, centuries-old forests still encircle shrines, protected by tradition as much as by law. In parts of Africa and the Amazon, indigenous peoples continue to live within the forest's rhythm, taking only what can be replaced, listening to the land instead of bending it. These communities remind the world that living with the forest does not mean freezing time. It means moving in time with it. Even in modern cities, the memory of the forest remains. Tree-lined streets, wooden floors, shaded parks, all echoes of that original connection. We build with concrete and steel now, but we still plant trees along sidewalks. We still gather in green spaces to feel something softer, something older. Forests shaped the course of human development, but they also mirrored our choices. When we listened, they flourished. When we forgot, they thinned. And yet, they continue to offer the same things: shelter, beauty, balance, breath. There's a kind of grace in their patience. A tree does not punish. It does not hurry to regrow or rush to reclaim what was taken. It waits, and if given the chance, it returns. To walk through an old forest is to walk through history, not the history written in books, but the kind remembered by wind and soil. A place where our ancestors gathered kindling and courage, where decisions were made beneath rustling branches, where silence held the weight of meaning. We often speak of forests as something outside of ourselves, but they've always been part of the story, not only in wood and fire, but in the way we see space, build shelter, create rhythm. The forest was our first architecture, our first medicine, our first metaphor, and perhaps, in remembering that, we come closer to the pace we've lost. Long before maps drew borders or cathedrals reached skyward, forests were our first sanctuaries. Beneath their canopies, people found not just food and shelter, but something harder to define, something felt rather than explained. In every part of the world, cultures have turned to forests, not only for survival, but for meaning. There is something about the way light filters through branches, how roots curl around stone, how silence hangs in the air, that invites reverence. Not fear, exactly, but respect. A recognition that this space lives by its own rules, older than ours. In many traditions, certain groves were not walked through casually. They were approached slowly, with offerings, with words left unsaid. In ancient Greece, sacred groves were dedicated to gods and nymphs, places where trees were not cut, where birds were considered messengers. The rustling of leaves might carry an answer. The flicker of shadow might signal a presence. These groves were temples without walls, and their silence held the weight of prayer. The Celts saw forests as living entities, with each tree species carrying its own spirit: oak for strength, ash for connection, yew for transition. Druids held ceremonies beneath branches rather than rooftops, believing the forest itself was witness, guide, and teacher. Stories were not just told about the forest, they were told within it, shaped by the wind, remembered in roots. In India, ancient texts speak of the forest as a place of retreat and awakening. Sages left behind the noise of the village to enter the wild, not to escape life, but to deepen it. Forests were considered purer than cities, closer to the divine. Even now, sacred groves remain, preserved not by law, but by tradition. Trees are not merely planted, they are protected as living deities. In many indigenous cultures across the Americas, the forest is not background, it is kin. Every tree, every animal, every river has its place in a shared story. Rituals involve trees not symbolically, but personally, addressed as elders, honored as teachers. The forest is not a metaphor, it is relationship. Even in modern stories, the sacred forest remains. From fairy tales to epic fantasies, the deep woods are where truth is revealed, where transformation begins. Characters get lost among trees only to find something deeper: wisdom, courage, themselves. The forest is where rules break down, where time stretches, where mystery still breathes. This sense of the forest as more than matter, as presence, continues even if we no longer name it aloud. A walk among old trees still quiets the voice in the mind. A grove still feels different than an open field. We speak more softly, we step more carefully. We may not call it sacred, but we feel it all the same. Science now tells us that trees communicate, that forests self-regulate, that their silence hides complex intelligence. But long before these discoveries, humans intuited something similar, that the forest knows in a way we do not, that it holds memory not in books, but in bark, that it listens and speaks, if we slow enough to hear. Perhaps the idea of the sacred is not about myth or magic, perhaps it's about attention. Forests, by their very nature, invite a kind of attention we rarely offer elsewhere, a long, quiet noticing, a presence that deepens the more we remain still. To sit beneath an old tree is to enter a space held by time. The wind may shift, the light may change, but the tree remains. Its trunk has endured storm and drought, seen generations pass, and yet it holds its posture with grace. It offers no sermon, yet teaches. It offers no command, yet reminds. In this way, the forest is a sanctuary not because we made it so, but because it allows us to remember what stillness feels like. And that, too, is sacred. We often think of forests as something outside of us, places we visit, admire, protect, but the connection runs deeper than observation. It lives in our lungs, our skin, our minds. When we enter a forest, something changes inside us, not through belief or effort, but through biology. The forest doesn't just surround us, it meets us, breath for breath. Take the air, for example. Forest air is not just cleaner, it is chemically different. Trees release compounds called phytoncides, natural oils that protect them from insects and disease. When we breathe in these oils, our bodies respond. Heart rates slow, stress hormones decrease, immune cells become more active. It is not suggestion, it is response. Even the scent of a forest, pine resin, damp earth, crushed leaves, carries effects. Smell bypasses language. It moves directly to the brain's emotional center, triggering calm without explanation. A single breath can return the mind to a quieter place, a place remembered without being remembered. Studies have shown that people who walk in forests experience reduced anxiety, improved mood, better sleep. The act of being among trees, without agenda, allows the nervous system to shift from vigilance to rest. Blood pressure drops, muscles unclench, the breath deepens. We call it forest bathing, but the body already knows. It's not something new, it's something we once did without thinking. The shapes of the forest also matter. Our eyes are drawn to fractals, patterns that repeat at different scales, and these occur everywhere in nature. The branching of trees, the veins in leaves, the flow of rivers, the brain, when exposed to fractals, enters a state of relaxed awareness, not sleepy, not distracted, present, rested, aligned. Even the color green carries weight. It is the most restful color for the human eye. It falls in the middle of the visible light spectrum, requiring minimal adjustment from the lens. We associate green with safety, with growth, with balance. In hospitals, green is used to soothe. In forests, it surrounds us without design, but with the same effect. There is also something in the rhythm of a forest that mirrors our own. Trees do not rush. Their movements are slow, cyclical, organic. Leaves open and close, sap rises and falls, light filters and fades. When we enter that rhythm, we adjust. Our internal tempo, so often dictated by clocks and screens, finds a slower beat. We breathe differently. We listen more. And it's not just physiology. The forest speaks to something emotional, perhaps ancestral. For thousands of generations, humans lived near or within forests. We hunted beneath trees, found shelter among branches, marked seasons by what bloomed and fell. Our nervous systems evolved in response to rustling leaves, birdsong, the scent of rain on bark. So when we enter a forest now, no matter how modern we've become, something recognizes it. There is a quiet exhale, almost involuntary, a recognition, a return. We may not know the names of the trees, but our bodies remember the feeling of being near them. Children, even without instruction, are drawn to trees. They climb, sit, hide, gather. There is comfort in bark, in shade, in something tall and steady. The forest becomes a kind of friend, not demanding, but always present, always breathing. In cities, we try to recreate this. Parks, green roofs, tree-lined streets. And while they help, the full effect lies in immersion, in being surrounded, not just accompanied, in walking without direction, in listening without waiting for a reply. The forest does not cure everything, but it recalibrates, it softens, it gives space to feel, to slow, to remember the parts of ourselves that thrive in quiet. And so, perhaps the forest is not just a place we visit for peace. Perhaps it is where peace was first shaped. In the quiet shade of a forest, healing often begins before we realize it. Not with medicine in the traditional sense, not with pills or procedures, but with rhythm, light, and stillness. The forest heals by inviting us to step out of urgency and back into alignment. In Japan, the practice is called Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing. It does not involve exercise or even distance. One need not hike or strive. The only requirement is to be there, among the trees, with the senses open, to walk slowly, to notice, to breathe. The results are measurable. Cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, drops. Blood pressure lowers, mood lifts, even sleep improves. But beyond the numbers lies something harder to describe, a sense of being rebalanced. Modern life often pushes us into disconnection. Artificial light resets our circadian rhythms. Screens crowd our vision. Schedules compress time. But in the forest, there is no clock, only cycles. Day and night, growth and decay, light and shadow. These patterns, ancient and continuous, speak to something primal within us, a tempo we were never meant to abandon. When we walk among trees, we unconsciously begin to mirror their pace. Our steps slow, our thoughts stretch out, less frantic, more fluid. Even our breathing finds a natural cadence, longer exhales, steadier inhales. This shift in rhythm is not passive, it's participatory. The forest does not perform for us. It simply continues, and in doing so, reminds us how to continue, too. The medicine of the forest is also found in its textures. The feel of rough bark under the fingers, cool moss underfoot, the slick surface of a leaf after rain. These tactile moments return us to the body. They anchor awareness in the present, in what is touchable, real, unhurried. This sensory grounding is a form of repair, the body remembering what attention feels like when it is not pulled in 100 directions. There is also medicine in the forest's unpredictability. Unlike artificial environments, which are designed and controlled, a forest is full of small surprises. A bird calls unexpectedly, a squirrel rustles overhead, a shaft of sunlight slips between branches just long enough to warm your face. These moments are not planned, and it's their unpredictability that makes them healing. They interrupt rumination. They return us, gently, to now. The forest also offers solitude, not the emptiness of isolation, but the richness of undisturbed space. It allows for reflection without demand. You can be quiet here without explanation. You can feel what you feel without commentary. The forest makes room for whatever you bring, and quietly holds it without judgment. Even grief softens here, not because it disappears, but because it finds context. Trees fall and decompose, leaves die and return to soil. Loss is not a flaw in the forest, it is part of the cycle. In this way, the forest becomes not just a place to escape pain, but a place to understand it. And when joy returns, as it eventually does, the forest celebrates without noise. A clearing feels brighter, a breeze feels more generous. The heart, no longer pressed by constant noise, expands into stillness. This is not magic, it is ecology, biology, attention, but it feels like magic because we are rarely allowed to slow down long enough to receive it. The forest heals not by changing us, but by allowing us to be unchanged for a while, to be without performance, to be among life that asks nothing of us but presence. You don't need to know the names of trees to be healed by them. You don't need to explain your sadness to the moss. You don't need to earn the calm that arrives when the wind moves through branches, and you remember, even for a moment, what being whole feels like. Sometimes the most profound medicine is not intervention, but return. Some forests no longer stand, and yet they still leave traces. A clearing in the mountains, where the air feels too dry. A hillside that once caught mist, now turned to dust. A valley echoing with silence, where birds no longer return. These are not just spaces where trees have been cut. They are spaces where an entire rhythm has been interrupted. Deforestation is often described in numbers: hectares lost per minute, percentage declines, global impact charts. But those figures flatten what is deeply dimensional. A forest is not just a patch of land with trees, it is a layered memory, a self-sustaining exchange, a network of lives moving in coordination. When it is removed, that memory doesn't simply disappear, It lingers, like the outline of a body after it has risen from the bed. In places where old forests once stood, the soil often becomes exposed, not just to wind and sun, but to forgetfulness. Without shade, moisture escapes. Microbial communities collapse. Roots that once held ground in place are gone, and the earth begins to loosen, slip, wander. Streams grow cloudy. Rain behaves differently. Heat settles into the land like a weight. The forest's absence is not passive. It shifts the entire balance of place. Animals, too, carry this loss in their movement. Migration paths shift. Songs go unanswered. A species that once nested in a particular tree may travel hundreds of kilometers in search of another, only to find none. What was once home becomes space. And space, without function, without shelter, becomes vulnerability. But the most subtle losses are often the hardest to trace. Without trees, clouds form differently. Air flows change. Rain may fall heavier in one season, vanish in the next. Local farmers speak of altered winds, of unpredictable sun. Generations who once knew the land by instinct now watch it shift in ways they can't explain. The forest may be gone, but its absence keeps speaking. And yet, not all loss is final. In some soils, seeds sleep, waiting for conditions to return. Roots remain, buried like faint lines in a forgotten map. Fungi linger, even in fragmented patches, looking for hosts. In these remnants, the forest remembers how to come back, but it must be allowed time. Time not measured in human urgency, but in the slow unfolding of resilience. Replanting is not as simple as putting trees in rows. A forest is not a field, it is not a crop. It builds itself through complexity. Trees of different ages, species with complementary needs, relationships between canopy and floor, leaf and insect, bark and moss. Restoration means more than presence. It means returning function, rhythm, breath. In parts of the world that process has begun. Abandoned farmland grows wild again. Wildlife corridors are stitched back into landscapes. Communities plant not for timber, but for balance, building forests not as resource banks, but as neighbors. What we call the lost forest may never return exactly as it was. But something can return, a new form, shaped by time, guided by attention. The land is not trying to become what it was, it is always trying to become something living, and perhaps, in witnessing loss, we sharpen our understanding of value. The silence left by missing trees is not emptiness, it is instruction, a space that teaches by absence, a space that invites us to listen more closely to what remains. Forests are resilient, but not invincible. They do not resist us. They respond to us. And when we stop to recognize what has gone, not only in despair, but in awareness, we begin to shift the conversation, from loss to repair, from mourning to remembering, from forgetting to care. Some forests fall in fire, others by saw. Some go quietly, their canopies fading year by year, unnoticed until they are no longer overhead. But even then, the land remembers. And where memory remains, possibility lives. Not everything in a forest needs to begin. Some things simply need a chance to return. After fire or flood, after clear-cutting or collapse, the land does not wait for permission to recover. It begins again, quietly, from whatever was left behind. A buried seed, a still living root, a patch of lichen clinging to stone. Where we see ruin, nature sees unfinished work. Regrowth does not always follow the path we expect. It begins unevenly. A cluster of hardy shrubs here, a sapling there, bent sideways by wind but reaching anyway. The ground, once bare, begins to roughen with life. The soil darkens, threads of fungi reappear, tracing out new networks. What had been broken opens again, not in protest, but in insistence. This isn't a dramatic return. It's incremental, an inch of new growth over a season. A bird returning to nest in a tree just strong enough to hold it. A moth laying eggs on leaves that weren't there the year before. Recovery in a forest moves at the speed of trust, each layer returning only after the one before it has settled. And yet, this slowness is its strength. Fast systems can break all at once, but the forest, with its long patience, builds resilience over time. Roots deepen, diversity increases. Species learn to coexist. What was once a monoculture becomes a mosaic. A grove once uniform begins to carry contrast, in height, in age, in function. Reforestation, when guided by this principle of patience, becomes something more than planting. It becomes listening, allowing the land to speak first, watching which species return without help, which ones struggle, which ones wait for shade, which ones demand sun. It means resisting the urge to fix everything at once, and instead, creating the conditions in which life can choose its own pace. In many places, this is already happening. Abandoned fields in Europe, left untouched for decades, have slowly filled with birch, then oak, then beech. In tropical regions, formerly logged forests, when left undisturbed, have begun to reweave their canopy. Birds carry seeds, wind distributes pollen. What was once a wound becomes texture. But the forest doesn't just rebuild itself above the ground, it repairs its voice below as well. The fungal networks begin to form again, linking new trees into shared knowledge. Soil organisms multiply, breaking down leaf litter, feeding new roots. Water, once lost to evaporation, begins to linger. The breath of the forest deepens. Not all recovery is natural. Sometimes people help, planting native species, clearing invasive ones, restoring rivers that feed the land. But even then, the best interventions are the ones that disappear, that give way to autonomy, that understand healing isn't about control, but about space. There is a deep humility in watching a forest return. It reminds us that we are not the only authors of this world, that life does not wait for our instructions, that given time and enough stillness, the earth will begin again. And not in defiance of us, but in conversation with us. The hands that once cut can also plant. The minds that once planned extraction can now design corridors, protections, long-term care. Regrowth is not only biological, it's cultural. It's a shift in how we see forests, not as tools, but as systems. Not as scenery, but as partners. Even the act of noticing regrowth changes us. A weed breaking through concrete, a young pine stretching in the shadow of a ruined stump. These are not minor signs. They are declarations, soft, steady ones, that loss is not the final chapter. Forests don't forget how to grow. They remember with every seed, every spore, every curling shoot that finds its way back to light. And in their return, they invite us to do the same. Beneath the canopy, under leaves, inside bark, within the soil, a quiet nation is always at work, not loud like birds, nor towering like trees, but essential, constant. Without it, the forest would unravel at its roots. This nation is made of insects. We rarely think of them as part of the forest's lungs, and yet they help it breathe in more ways than one. Pollinators, decomposers, recyclers, engineers. They move nutrients, stitch systems together, and fill every corner of the understory with motion too small to notice, unless you look closely. Take the leafcutter ant. With perfect coordination, it cuts fragments of green and carries them underground, not to eat, but to grow fungus, their food. In doing so, the ant aerates the soil, recycles organic matter, and fertilizes the roots of trees above. Every tunnel dug is a breath added to the earth, every colony a hidden infrastructure. Or the dung beetle, a creature often dismissed, yet its role in recycling waste is critical. By burying animal droppings, it enriches the soil and prevents disease, turning decay into nourishment. Without beetles, waste would build, nutrients would stall, cycles would clog. Bees, of course, are better known. Their dance from flower to flower ensures fruit, seed, and continuation. But forests rely on a far wider cast than honeybees alone. Solitary bees, wasps, hoverflies, each with a niche, each linked to specific plants. Some trees depend on a single species for pollination. Remove the insect, and no seeds will come. And then there are the silent scavengers, termites, springtails, and woodlice, feeding on dead wood, fallen leaves, and fungal threads. What they consume becomes the next generation of growth. They do not waste. They do not rush. They know how to break things down gently, completely. Even the loudest insects, the cicadas, the crickets, play their part. Their sounds mark seasons, attract mates, guide migration for predators. The hum of the forest is not random. It's a score written over millions of years, and insects are its most practiced musicians. Yet despite their importance, these tiny allies are disappearing, not in waves, but in a steady, silent retreat. Pesticides, habitat fragmentation, pollution, and climate shifts disrupt the micro-world they depend on. Some forests now bloom with fewer pollinators. Others grow still with too few decomposers to keep up with the fall of leaves. It's easy to overlook what we do not see. A fallen tree catches our eye. A missing bird is noted. But when insects fade, the forest's decline begins invisibly. Nutrient cycles falter, regeneration slows, webs of connection weaken. And yet, their return is possible. Protecting undergrowth, reducing chemical intrusion, restoring native plant diversity, these acts bring insects back. They ask only for habitat and balance. Given both, they recover faster than most. They don't wait for recognition. They only need space. Some conservation efforts now focus entirely on insect life, planting corridors rich in wildflowers, protecting old logs and brush piles, allowing the untidy parts of nature to remain untouched. These messes, so often cleaned up by habit, are homes. To walk in a healthy forest is to walk above a thriving world. Thousands of wings beating under leaf litter, mouths working on bark, legs tunneling through humus, a constant renewal, silent and invisible. We think of forests as tall and wide, but they are also small and close, found in the flick of a moth's wing, the curl of a beetle's path, the glint of dew on a spider's web stretched across a fern. These small citizens do not ask for attention, but they deserve it, because in their absence, the forest's breath begins to falter, and in their presence, it finds its rhythm again. Long before we understood forests through science, we listened to them. Not for meaning in the way we listen to speech, but for rhythm, the crackle of branches, the call of birds, the hush of leaves shifting in the breeze. The forest, even in stillness, is never silent. It breathes not just in carbon, but in sound. Every forest has its own acoustic fingerprint. A rainforest hums with the constant percussion of life, insects in the underbrush, frogs in the canopy, birds weaving melodies between. A pine forest whispers with long, sighing winds through needles. A deciduous woodland pulses with rustles and creaks, the chatter of squirrels, the distant drumming of a woodpecker. These sounds are more than atmosphere. They are signals, information passed from creature to creature, from branch to branch. Birds warn of predators. Monkeys communicate danger or desire. Even plants respond. Some studies suggest that roots may react differently when exposed to the frequencies of running water versus silence. Life listens. Scientists now study forests, using audio as a diagnostic tool. With long-term microphones embedded in the canopy or soil, they record every sound across hours, days, weeks. Then they analyze the results, not just what is heard, but what is missing. A forest rich in sound is often rich in life. A quiet forest, especially one that should be loud, may be in decline. The term for this study is ecoacoustics, and it's revealing things we never knew how to measure. Insects that are too small to track visually show up in sonic signatures. Birds that move too quickly for observation are logged by their songs. Even the timing of rains, flowering, and migration patterns can be traced through changes in sound. At dawn, the forest sings its loudest. This is the dawn chorus, a swelling wave of calls and responses that marks the start of the day. It's not just poetic, it's functional. Birds use these early hours to claim territory, attract mates, coordinate movement. For a few brief moments, the entire forest seems to speak at once. And then, at night, another voice rises. Owls call from hidden roosts. Crickets begin their steady rhythm. Frogs test the air with clicks and croaks. The tempo slows, but never fully stops. Even while we sleep, the forest stays awake, breathing in sound, exhaling stillness. But there's something else, something quieter. The subtle creak of a branch shifting its weight, the fall of a single leaf onto wet soil, the patter of rain filtered through layers of green. These are not signs of life in the way we usually measure it, yet they, too, are part of the forest's story. Sound carries meaning, but it also carries memory. Old forests, with complex structures and biodiversity, tend to have more layered soundscapes. Young or fragmented forests sound thinner, flatter, like a conversation missing half its voices. It's not always visible, but it's audible. And so, if we want to know how a forest is doing, we can listen. Not with expectation, but with presence. We can learn to hear the difference between healthy noise and troubled quiet. We can begin to recognize the songs of return, when frogs come back to a restored wetland, when birds find their way to regrown thickets, when the wind once again has branches to move through. In this way, sound becomes both a tool and a teacher, a way to feel connected to what cannot be seen, a reminder that forests are not only lungs, they are voices. Not voices that speak to us, but voices that exist whether we are there to hear them or not. And to listen is to remember that presence is enough. That observation is participation. That sometimes the best way to understand a living system is to let it speak and be quiet long enough to hear it. To walk on the forest floor is to walk across centuries. Each step falls on more than dirt. It lands on a layered world of fallen leaves, rotting wood, moss, mycelium, burrowing creatures, and forgotten seeds. The forest may stretch tall above, but it is anchored in this soft, shadowed bed where everything returns and everything begins. Unlike the crisp, sterile floors of human dwellings, the forest floor is textured and alive. It's uneven, fragrant, and in constant motion. Beneath the leaf litter, thousands of creatures work unseen. Beetles dismantle bark, worms churn soil, fungi spread filaments like spider silk, and microbes conduct unseen chemistry. This is not waste, this is infrastructure. Every leaf that falls is a message dropped from the canopy, a record of sunlight once captured, now offered back to the earth. Fallen branches become bridges for ants and tunnels for grubs. Dead trees, lying horizontal, become nurseries for new ones. In these quiet corridors, moss takes hold, and ferns unfurl like green scrolls from the cracks. The forest floor is not a graveyard, but a workshop. Decay here is not destruction, it's transformation. Nothing stays static. What dies feeds what comes next. Bark sloughs off, flesh returns to mineral. Even bones, when they appear, are slowly welcomed into the process, softened by rain, colonized by lichen, broken down by time. Soil itself is a kind of memory. Rich, dark humus is formed from decades, even centuries, of organic life returning home. The richer the soil, the deeper the forest's past. In some places, a handful of earth contains the residue of generations of trees, fungi, animals, and weather, all pressed together into a substance that feels alive in your palm. Many seeds need this floor to be disturbed before they'll grow. Some wait for the shadow of a fallen giant to open a patch of sun. Others rely on fire to crack their shells, heat to awaken their code. Still others, especially in deep shade, wait patiently for years until the right conditions arrive. The forest floor listens. It does not rush. Animals know this world well. Boars root through it for food. Bears dig shallow beds to rest. Birds gather nesting material from its threads. Insects disappear into its crevices. Even the roots of towering trees begin here, tender at first, hair-thin and seeking, threading themselves through detritus until they reach something stable. And yet, this world is fragile. When compacted by heavy machines or stripped bare, the floor loses its breath. Rain no longer soaks in but runs off. Seeds wash away. Nutrients leach out. What was once a sponge becomes a slab. Recovery here takes time, far longer than regrowing trunks or leaves, because what lives beneath is built in layers, and each layer is earned by patience. In temperate forests, autumn is the season of offering. Trees shed their leaves not in surrender, but in trust. giving them back to the soil, confident that next year's growth will draw from today's fall. In tropical forests, this offering is constant, a gentle snowfall of petals, bark, and life's leftovers. The floor is never empty, and in this exchange, from leaf to litter to loam, the forest breathes. Not upward into sky, but downward into time. It remembers through its roots, through its worms, through its rot, and from that memory, it begins again. To pause in a forest and crouch close to the floor is to see what holds everything up. It's to realize that the base is not the bottom, but the beginning. That what we walk on is not the end of the story, but its quiet origin. The forest floor does not speak loudly, but its voice is everywhere, in the scent of fresh soil, in the softness underfoot, in the silence of renewal happening just beneath the surface. Light in a forest does not behave the way it does in open fields or cities. It filters, bends, dapples. It arrives slowly in the morning, pouring in through layers of leaves like liquid gold, and in the evening, it fades not suddenly, but in gradients, warm, low, and quiet. This quality of light is not just beautiful, it's biological. Our bodies respond to light in ways that stretch back to the earliest mammals. Deep in our brains, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a cluster of cells no larger than a grain of rice, keeps time. It synchronizes our internal clocks to the rhythm of the sun. This is our circadian rhythm. In cities, that rhythm is often fractured. Artificial lights extend day far into night. Screens pulse with unnatural brightness. Sleep becomes lighter, shorter, or delayed. But in forests, light returns to its original role: timekeeper, mood setter, healer. Studies show that spending even a few nights camping in a forest, with no artificial lights, only fire and stars, can reset the body's natural sleep-wake cycle. Melatonin, the hormone that governs sleep, rises earlier. Deep sleep increases, dreams return in longer phases, waking feels more aligned with dawn. You don't need to fall asleep immediately for the forest to help. Just being among the trees in fading light, letting your eyes adjust to dusk, allows the nervous system to downshift. The body begins to slow. Thoughts stretch out, breathing deepens. The need to perform dissolves. There is no schedule here, no notifications, only the sky, dimming, gently. Some cultures understood this intuitively. Forests were where people went not just to hunt or gather, but to restore, to retreat. Monks meditated beneath trees for days. Healers sent the sick to recover in wooded cabins. Poets sought silence among moss and stone. The forest was not a backdrop, it was a participant in rest. Even now, sleep researchers are beginning to ask questions that transcend the bedroom. What if our insomnia is not just personal, but ecological? What if we struggle to rest because we've lost contact with the conditions that shaped our sleep for millennia? The softness of darkness, the cooling air, the layered sounds of nighttime life. In the forest, night doesn't fall. It arrives, slow and intentional. Insects begin their chorus. Owls stir. Leaves rustle not in warning, but in rhythm. This symphony of dark is not frightening. It is grounding. It reminds us that night is not a void, but a phase, and that sleep too is not an interruption of life, but part of its pattern. For those who cannot sleep, the forest offers something else: permission. Permission to lie still, to not be productive, to simply exist without requirement. Sleep may come, or it may not, but either way, the forest does not rush you. And when sleep finally does arrive, under stars, near pine, beside the slow sigh of wind through leaves, it feels like something ancient and correct. Not forced, not managed, just returned. Forests have always been teachers of time. Their rings record years, their cycles measure seasons, and their shadows, long and layered, teach us how to rest again. So if your mind still turns as the night deepens, let it turn in rhythm with branches above. Let it slow, not stop. Let it breathe with the pace of the trees. There is no need to hurry towards sleep. It will come, like twilight through leaves, quiet, unannounced, right on time. Forests are not passive victims of climate. They are architects of it. Every tree, every patch of canopy, every tangle of root contributes not only to local weather, but to regional and even planetary patterns. Forests do not just react to climate change, they shape the climate itself. At the core of this influence is evapotranspiration, the process by which trees pull water from the soil and release it into the air through their leaves. This invisible mist becomes part of clouds, clouds become rain, and rain feeds rivers, fields, people. A single large tree can release hundreds of liters of water into the atmosphere in a day, creating microclimates beneath its crown and contributing to rain patterns far beyond its reach. Now imagine a forest of thousands or millions. The Amazon, sometimes called a flying river, pumps moisture across an entire continent. Moisture from the Congo Basin helps cool the air above it. Boreal forests in the north influence jet streams and snow patterns. These systems are not isolated. They are breathing, evaporating, circulating engines that affect weather on a planetary scale. But it goes deeper still. Forests cool the land beneath them, not just by shade, but by albedo, the measure of how much sunlight a surface reflects. A dense forest absorbs sunlight and converts it into growth, instead of allowing it to bounce back as heat. When forests are removed, temperatures rise not only because of carbon emissions, but because the land reflects more solar energy. The balance tilts. Forests also store carbon, of course, pulling it from the air, locking it into trunks, branches, roots, and soil. But their role is not static. A forest in balance sequesters carbon. A damaged one releases it. Fires, logging, and disease can transform a forest from a sink to a source. The health of a forest determines the direction of its influence. Temperature, rainfall, wind, all of these are modulated by forests. And as the climate changes, the forests respond, often in uneven ways. In some regions, trees are growing faster due to higher carbon levels. In others, they're dying more quickly due to drought, pests, or heat waves. The balance is delicate. A tipping point in one region can echo outward in unexpected ways. Take snow, for example. In boreal forests, snow trapped beneath branches melts more slowly, feeding groundwater over time. But if the forest thins, more sunlight hits the snowpack directly. It melts too fast. Rivers flood and dry unpredictably. A shift in one forest's composition can ripple across water systems that serve cities and farms hundreds of kilometers away. Even wind moves differently through forests. A healthy canopy slows it, filters it, distributes its force. When forests are cleared, wind accelerates, drying the land, spreading fire more easily, and destabilizing remaining trees. The forest is not just a wall, it's a modulator of motion, softening the climate's sharpest edges. And yet, for all this influence, forests are also vulnerable. They can't migrate quickly. They can't outrun fire or drought. Their adaptation is slow, generational, and so as the climate changes faster than their ability to adjust, they stand exposed. But resilience exists. Some trees shift their leaf timing. Some species move uphill or northward. Microclimates within forests, pockets of cool, moist air beneath dense canopy, act as refuges for life during heat waves. These forest features may one day become lifeboats, and we are not separate from this system. Cities heat more slowly when they are near forests. Farmlands are more productive when tree cover remains in the watershed. Even the air we breathe, its temperature, its moisture, its purity, carries the signature of forests, whether we notice or not. Forests do not fight climate change like warriors. They adjust it like gardeners, trimming excess, shading extremes, holding moisture where it's needed. They do this not with intention, but with presence. And in their presence, the world holds its balance. To protect forests is not only to save trees, it is to stabilize wind and rain, to cool a warming world, to give the earth a chance to breathe in rhythm again. There are places in every forest where silence feels older than time, where the trees grow close and tall, and the light comes in thin and slanted, as if filtered through memory. These are not just groves of wood and leaf, they are sanctuaries, not because someone named them so, but because people, across cultures and centuries, have always felt something stir in their presence. Forests are not only ecological spaces, they are emotional landscapes, repositories of myth, fear, refuge, and transformation. Long before forests were measured or mapped, they were entered with reverence or caution. In stories passed from mouth to mouth, forests were never just settings, they were thresholds, a place you entered, not just physically, but spiritually. In many traditions, forests marked the boundary between the known and the unknown. Beyond the last field, the last cottage, lay the world of spirits, trials, self-discovery. The hero entered the forest not to find something, but to be changed. What happened inside, the whispers, the visions, the encounters, shaped who they became. Even now, stripped of fable, the feeling remains. Walk alone beneath a dense canopy, and you may feel watched, not by something hostile, but by something vast. A presence built not from eyes, but from age. It's not about belief in fairies or gods, it's about sensing that the forest is older than you, and that in its presence your urgency quiets. Many indigenous cultures never lost this understanding. For them, forests are not resources, but relations. Trees are elders, mountains are ancestors, rivers are stories flowing downhill. To enter the forest is to enter into relationship, one shaped by respect, gratitude, and careful listening. Even in the West, where forests were long seen as wild land to be tamed, there remain traces of reverence. Cathedrals were built to mimic groves, with columns like trunks and ceilings like leafy vaults. The language of nature, even when distanced by religion or science, still shaped the architecture of awe. For some, forests became places of retreat. Monks withdrew to live among trees. Mystics sought silence in the woods. Writers and wanderers alike found solace in the quiet, where thoughts stretched and softened. The forest, with its unhurried rhythms, gave permission to pause. There is something profoundly equalizing about standing among trees. They do not care who you are. They do not rush your thoughts. They do not demand you speak. They simply surround, shelter, and absorb. The human mind, so often spiraling outward, turns inward in forests, not in isolation, but in reconnection. And in the modern world, where noise and speed dominate, this reconnection becomes more valuable. People walk wooded trails not just for exercise, but for clarity. Forest bathing, Shinrin-yoku in Japan, is now widely recognized for its psychological benefits, lowering cortisol, steadying heart rate, improving mood. But long before the studies, the feeling was known. Even grief moves differently in forests. The stillness makes space for it. The wind gives it motion. The forest doesn't console with words. It consoles by existing, unchanged, enduring, full of slow beauty that reminds us not everything breaks quickly. And when joy comes, the forest holds that too. In the filtered light through high branches, in the sudden flurry of wings, in the feeling of moss beneath the hand. It is not joy of spectacle, but of presence, a joy that does not ask to be named. To see forests only as carbon stores or biodiversity vaults is to miss half their power. They are not only lungs of the earth, they are lungs of the soul. They let us breathe differently, think differently, remember what it means to belong without proving our worth. And perhaps that's why forests remain sacred, even in secular times, because they do not need us to explain them. They only ask that we stay long enough to feel what they have always offered: stillness, shadow, shelter, and the quiet possibility of being changed. A tree falls in a forest in Borneo, and somewhere, faintly, the atmosphere shifts. Not enough for anyone to notice in that moment, but enough for the scales to tip, ever so slightly, toward more heat, more dryness, more imbalance. One tree, then 1,000, then 1,000,000, and the world begins to feel it. Forests are not islands. They are nodes in a vast network, stitched together by wind, water, and climate. What happens in one rainforest affects air patterns thousands of kilometers away. What burns in the Amazon can alter rainfall in Texas. Deforestation in Indonesia can shift monsoon rhythms in India. These are not metaphors. These are measurable facts. Moisture moves across continents like breath. Forests exhale it into the air, and winds carry it onward. When forests are healthy, they act as consistent sources of this breath, pumping water vapor into the atmosphere, helping form clouds, cooling the land below. But when tree cover disappears, that breath falters. The air becomes warmer, drier, less generous. This means that protecting a forest is not a local kindness. It is a global necessity. It's not only about orangutans or sloths or orchids, though each is worthy of saving. It's about climate regulation, crop stability, and water availability for millions who may never walk among those trees, but depend on their presence just the same. Take the Congo Basin. It's the second largest rainforest on Earth, and one of the most critical carbon sinks we have. It influences rainfall as far north as the Sahel, helping to prevent drought. Yet, illegal logging, mining, and agriculture threaten it daily. Its future, though shaped in Central Africa, will be felt in Europe, Asia, and beyond. Or consider boreal forests, those wide belts of green that sweep across Canada, Russia, and Scandinavia. These forests hold vast stores of carbon in their cold soils. If they thaw too quickly due to global warming, they could release more greenhouse gases than all current human emissions combined. What protects them protects us all. This is the paradox of modern conservation. Many of the most important forests are in countries that bear the least responsibility for global emissions. The wealthiest nations, whose consumption often drives deforestation elsewhere, live with the illusion of distance. But there is no real distance on a planet held together by air and ocean. Global forests are like shared organs. We may live in different places, speak different languages, eat different foods, but we all rely on the breath, the shade, the water held in these living systems. The Amazon doesn't belong to Brazil. The tiger doesn't belong to Russia. They belong to the earth. And so, the question becomes one of stewardship. Not just how do we protect forests, but how do we honor our role in their future? Some answers are policy-driven: international agreements, trade laws that discourage illegal timber, support for indigenous land rights. Others are personal: choosing what we consume, how we travel, what we fund, what we ignore. There's power in knowing that our lives are linked to trees we'll never see, that our breath is stabilized by roots we'll never touch, that the rain falling in one place may have begun its journey evaporating from leaves half a world away. This web of interdependence is not a weakness, it's a strength, the biological version of solidarity. What protects a forest protects a future. What destroys it echoes far beyond the stump. And perhaps that's the truest definition of a forest's value. Not what we can extract from it, but what it allows everything else to become. In saving forests, we save possibility for the planet and for ourselves. Stand still in a forest, and the world seems to exhale. The pace changes, thoughts slow. What once felt urgent begins to soften at the edges. There's no finish line here, no scoreboard, no need to explain yourself. Just the whisper of leaves and the slow, steady breath of a place that has existed far longer than your worries, and will exist long after they've passed. Forests do not shout, they do not impose, they reveal. Step by step they show us what patience looks like, what balance requires, what resilience feels like when it's built from thousands of silent choices, roots growing deeper, branches reaching further, fungi stitching life beneath the surface. No single element of the forest survives alone, and none demands the spotlight. Life here thrives in layers, in quiet collaboration. We often think of forests in pieces: the tallness of trees, the richness of soil, the calls of birds. But a forest is not its parts. It is what happens between them. It is the relationship, the way moisture passes from leaf to air, the way a fallen log feeds a seedling, the way shadow shelters the smallest winged thing. And so, we return to the idea of forests as lungs, not only because they move oxygen and carbon, but because they move rhythm. They inhale chaos and exhale calm. They create space, in the air, in the body, in the mind. They remind us how to breathe, not just to survive, but to feel. In times of noise and speed, forests remain unchanged. They do not scroll. They do not blink. They do not need your attention to continue existing. But when you give it, something quiet opens. Not every lesson has to be loud. Some are absorbed, like morning mist or late light through leaves. Even in absence, forests linger. The scent of pine on a coat, the grain of wood beneath your fingers, the memory of walking a path dappled in light. These things stay. They are the imprint of a deeper kind of knowing, one that doesn't require proof or praise. To care for forests is not only to protect something beautiful, it is to protect a way of being, a slower way, a wilder way, one that remembers that not everything must be controlled, that not every outcome must be engineered, that sometimes the best thing we can do is to make space and let life unfold. Forests teach us this, that healing is not instant, that change is not linear, that death is not an ending, and that growth is not always visible. They teach us that silence is not emptiness, that stillness is not stagnation, that waiting can be wise. And perhaps most of all, they teach us how to return to nature, to balance, to breath, to self. So now, let your thoughts settle like leaves falling onto soft earth. Let the air move gently in and out, like wind through branches. There is nothing more to solve tonight. The forest is still breathing, and so are you. We from Sleepy Stories wish you a good night.